right. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you so much to 1455, Sean, and everybody involved with the festival for putting this together. I am really excited to be here because I'm talking with three writers that I like a lot, both personally and professionally. I'll start with intros. My name's Ed Amar. My last novel, They're Gone, came out late last year, published under my pseudonym, E.A. Bars. I'm a monthly columnist for the Washington Independent Review of Books, and I've also edited or co-edited with Sarah Chen, who you'll hear from in a second, two anthologies, The Night of the Flood and The Swamp Killers. So I will pass it on before we start to Sarah for your intro.
Sorry, I was trying to change my name on the Zoom. Okay. Hi, I'm Sarah Chen. I write short stories, crime fiction short stories mostly. I've written a novella, Cleaning Up Finn. I've written a children's book, and I've published I've edited two anthologies with Ed, co-edited, and then the most recent one was co-edited for the Sisters in Crime LA chapter. It just came out, their anthology. And yeah, I've also write essays, and that's it. That's me.
All right, great. Steph?
Hi, I'm Steph Cha. I am also a crime writer. I've written 4 novels, the Juniper Song trilogy and Your House Will Pay, which came out a couple years ago. And I used to be the noir editor of the LA Review of Books, and now I edit the Best American Mystery and Suspense anthology. I'm on my 2nd year of doing that. The first of those volumes will be out in the fall. Please look out for it. And I also do a lot of criticism, book reviews, stuff like that, and random essays. Yeah, that's me.
All right, thanks. Nikki?
Hi all, I'm Nikki Dolson. I am primarily a short story writer. I have a novel and stories that came out years ago, All Things Violent, and a short story collection that came out last year, Love and Other Criminal Behavior. And all of it is crime fiction. So that's what I write.
All right, thanks so much. So I wanted to start off with kind of a general question. Because I think this leads to something that really interests me about short stories. When did each of you start writing and, well, really reading short stories and crime fiction? Or actually short stories in general, for that matter?
Should we just jump in, or? Oh, go ahead.
I'm sure I'm not the only one of us who loved Poe as a kid. Like, I loved Edgar Allan Poe, and I remember very, very vividly reading The Lottery, And I also have a very strong memory of reading a giant collection of O. Henry stories that I ended up loving. But I think because I'd been reading Poe, I was looking for like kind of dark, macabre shit in O. Henry, which of course like there isn't really. So I just kept reading these stories being like, when are like people gonna be like, when are people gonna go through like horrible deaths? And obviously that's not what the form is overall, but I think like there was this association because of Poe. Now obviously I read tons of crime short stories, but it's kind of like it's kind of come full circle now.
So how old were you when you started reading Poe?
Young. I don't know exactly how old, but under 10.
Yeah, now I'm just kind of getting into the psychology of what makes Steph Cha. So, I find that worrisome.
Aren't they all though? I mean, I definitely remember getting into Poe in school. I mean, at that age, I mean, the Cask of Amontillado, really
yes,
early.
That was my favorite. I was obsessed with that story.
That whole the bricking them up in the wall stayed with me for so long. There's nothing quite like that moment when you read that for the first time. I just it Poe most definitely was those early stages of that. Which kind of makes you wonder why they start you off with that. I mean, I'm sure there's other stuff, but that's the one that stuck.
When did you read it?
Uh, my gut says middle school, so 6th grade. Probably younger than that though, maybe 5th, somewhere in there.
I think I'm the outlier. I didn't even read short fiction that much at all when I was younger. I did read The Lottery in school. I don't know what grade that was. And I did read Poe, but it was in school. I think it must have been junior high. But I didn't really read much short fiction until I took a creative writing class in grad school. And I mean, I always wanted to write, but I kind of just put writing aside throughout college, and I didn't study English, or I didn't study literature or writing. I just studied communications. And then I happened to take a creative writing class. And then that's when I got turned on to short stories, but that wasn't until my 20s.
See, I'm the same way. I didn't read short fiction until college, and I didn't get well, I read some kind of like, humorous short stuff like Irma Bombeck or something, that was more of like an essay kind of thing. But the reason I want to start with it is I was wondering, no, I don't know. Does anyone here have a MFA? I don't either, but I took a lot of graduate level writing workshops, and it seems that that's really how they train you as a writer, is writing short stories, reading short stories. And it makes sense because you can write a couple of short stories over the course of a semester versus a novel. But I was wondering if that's part of the appeal for a lot of writers, is that they read them in school. But obviously I'm wrong, because that's no one's background
Obviously.
here.
I think that the past crime short stories is very different from the past to like the literary short story. I feel like very few crime writers, the ones who comfortably identify as crime writers, very few of us come from MFA backgrounds, because they kind of breed that out of you.
Right. I got that impression too, just from I had this fantasy of going, so I did a lot of research on it. But like genre in general seemed to be frowned upon. And that was like when somebody said, I need you to write a short story, I went directly to my Sherlock Holmes Chandler pile. So, I mean, it's the default in me. So I kind of tried to search that out. And when I didn't find it, I just kind of let go of that dream, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, when I was in school, it was I just ended up at a really good school for creative writing. And when I started studying writing, about halfway through, I switched from psychology. It was all literary. There was no genre that was accepted. And so that was really the brunt of it. And then when I got into crime fiction, because it was what I sort of secretly liked, I realized the crime fiction that I enjoyed was as good as the literary fiction I'd read. And there was a really strong short story market in crime fiction. I wanted to talk about that market a bit. You've each worked as editors in some aspect in short fiction, particularly short crime fiction. How did that come about? Sarah, do you want to start?
It was you.
Sure. That's why I started with you.
You dragged me into it. I blame you. No, actually, my first editing gig was with you on the night of the flood. And it was kind of by default, because, you brought me on board with the whole project. I was like one of the last people to be brought on. And then, I wasn't the last, but I came on later. And then we just sort of were trying to figure out who would edit, and you volunteered, and then nobody else would. So somehow I got roped into it, which I didn't mind. I mean, I had my background's actually in film and screenwriting, and I was a studio script reader for like 10 years. And then I was a screenplay consultant. So kind of the editing part, like I had the editor kind of in me already. So it wasn't a huge leap to be a co-editor with you, and it was fun. So
you mentioned you just edited the Sisters in Crime LA chapter anthology.
yeah, Avenging Angelinos, it just came out a few weeks ago.
How did that come about? Did the chapter ask people, or how was that experience? Did you have to go through submissions, or?
Yeah, they the Sisters in Crime reached out to me, or the chapter president reached out to me and asked if I wanted to edit. And then we had to read through, I think they had one round already of submission. It's all blind submissions, and they already went through one round. So we got the next round. And then among the three of us, we chose our favorites.
And Nikki, you worked with Shotgun Honey?
Mm-hmm. I'm with Shotgun now and Tough,
Okay.
that site. But it was Rock and a Hard Place. The guys over there, Jay and Roger Noakes, who invited me over to join their team. So that's where I got my start at.
So why did you even go into editing from writing?
I guess I had been lurking on the edges and submitting and getting rejected for a long time. But it seemed like a natural progression to be on the other side of that, to just kind of see what that side of the slush pile looks like. It's really eye-opening, but also super fun to read. I mean, hundreds of people I don't know but I get to read their work, and maybe it fits and maybe it doesn't, but it's just really great to see how people put together stories. And it's fun. It's fun, to be honest. I mean, people are definitely, their taste can run darker than mine, but still, I mean, there's the work that goes into it is always worth reading.
Are you still there? Sorry, at Rock and the Hard Place?
I'm not. I left that because I also think you need to be a good match. And Rock and the Hard Place, they are very gritty and very realistic crime. And there's only so much that my heart could take. And I was not the best fit for them. I love them and they do great things. But I was like, I know this guy named Paul Garth, and he's a perfect fit, and he continues to be a perfect fit for them. Ron Phillips at Shotgun Honey had a spot open, and we talked, and the flash fiction, that 700-word sweet spot there, not many can do it. I've only pulled it off once, and again, it's really just great to see how, particularly those stories that get through, how they can, in so few words, tell so much story. It's really fun. And then on the other end of that, Tough, you get longer work, and to see people stretch out like that after reading super short fiction, 5,000-6,000 word stories. Again, it's just really great to experience that.
And Steph, as you mentioned, you're with BAM's Best American Mystery Stories. And you just finished your first round with him. How was it?
It was great. I mean, I got to read. The nice thing about that is like, I didn't actually have to like edit anything, you know? I just read the stories that are already polished and edited by wonderful people like you know? So they're in their like best final form. And, you know, I get to kind of like sift through them. You know, it's a lot of volume, and, you know, it took me a little bit of figuring out to kind of like find the stories. You know, once people started submitting to me, it was a lot easier because, you know, anthology editors would submit to me, or like individual writers who wrote one story in an anthology would submit to me, so I would hear about that anthology and I'd go find it, you know. But yeah, I just kind of like looked through the usual suspects, kind of like all the journals that specialize in crime fiction, and then I read a bunch of anthologies, and I also kind of so I went and emailed a bunch of editors at more like literary journals who wouldn't necessarily submit to Best American Mystery, just asking if they had anything that was kind of in the mystery suspense vein. You know, because I had noticed that in like previous years, there were always stories from, you know, like kind of university journals and stuff like that, kind of mixed in. And I also actually found that there are more women writers in that pool relative to the kind of traditional mystery pool. I found that, I found that, like, you know, traditional sources like, you know, Ellery Queen or Alfred Hitchcock, or even some of the newer venues, you know, tend to be like pretty heavy on male writers. And I know that BAMS has had kind of a very, very male-centered gender divide in the past, and you know, I didn't want to like finagle that, but I did. You know, I'm obviously a woman crime writer. I get excited by like women who are writing crime fiction, and so, you know, I went around and kind of looked to make sure that I was getting everything that I could, you know, instead of kind of a skewed sample. But yeah, that was it was a lot of fun, and I worked with Alistair Burke, who's really wonderful, you know, and she's a friend of mine, and it was nice to, you know, I had a baby last year, and this was kind of the thing that helped me feel connected to the crime community. You know, these like short chunks. You know, I've read all three of you in the last year. You know, in a year when I wasn't able to do kind of very much professionally. You know, I had this. You know, I could just like hang out with the baby and like read some stories.
That sounds nice. I mean, I think a lot of people would like read with a drink, but with a baby, I mean, that's that's also very sweet. Were there, for each of you, you know, you know, the three of you took on new opportunities and challenges. Was there something you wanted to do, like like you mentioned, Steph, you talked about, you know, trying to find more woman crime fiction writers who hadn't necessarily been represented in the past, which is amazing because women have sort of dominated crime fiction commercially for a few years now, right? With psychological crime fiction, especially.
Oh yeah, ever since Gone Girl.
Right? Yeah.
It's been like 10 years of this, yeah.
Um, were there other things that, for Nikki and Sarah, were there like sort of philosophical things you wanted to bring, or was it more of a just joining a smoothly running machine?
For me, it was, I hadn't even considered it until I got invited. So then it was like, what am I bringing to that? And mostly it was my hope that if somebody saw that I was on the masthead as co-editor or what have you, that would encourage another Black writer to submit there, another woman to submit there. So there are pieces I submitted to, like there are no people of color, I'm gonna get it. And I didn't. But this is why I submitted, though, was a reason. And to find someone who looked like me, or just quite frankly who's not white, was a reason to submit also. And if I could be that to somebody else, that was great, I thought.
Sarah?
Yeah, I actually I don't really, well, when I'm picking stories, or when I was choosing stories, that I don't really have like a like a philosophy or something in mind, or an intention, I guess. I like stories ones that I just emotionally connect to. And I mean, for me, that's just what storytelling is the connection. And, you know, and usually those stories are about, you know, groups or a community that you normally wouldn't think about, or I guess what you'd call kind of on the fringes. So in a way, that's stories that I gravitate to, or stories about people you normally wouldn't read about. And maybe I do gravitate towards stories about kind of the underdog or Asian communities. So I don't know if that's just like my taste. But, you know, I try to seek out all sorts of stories, but the ones that, you know, it's about that connection. And I don't know if I answered the question.
No, you did. And it's interesting to me because it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, like the amount of writing that I've liked, considered good, how much of that was, you know, represented by sort of canon type writers, and how much of that was white and male, and stuff that other white male professors or editors related to, and then assumed was good because it spoke to some truth they recognized. Um, and it's interesting. You know, this is something that's talked about a lot, but I don't think the full measure of that has really been taken into account, or even
No.
understood yet.
No, and I think you know, something that we're all kind of touching on here is like it comes down to taste. And I think we've been sold this lie that like, you know, I think like the tastemakers and the gatekeepers have been white and male for so long, you know, in all genres, but definitely our genre, that like that has started to look neutral to us, you know, and objective. And that's obviously an illusion, you know. And I think like, you know, so you asked how we got like our gigs. Like I got my gig because like the like guy they had before, you know, it like was kind of this like white guy who was getting in kind of some trouble, may or may not have personally attacked me. And when they wanted to have kind of like go in a new direction. And I think like I never got a sit down. I was never told like we want you to create like a more, you know, contemporary, like diverse band. Like I was never told that. But I know that like if you hire me, you know, if you hire somebody who like looks like me, I'm just gonna have different tastes, you know. And I think all of us bring our own taste to the table. You know, Nikki, you were talking about like, you know, maybe like the super gritty stuff is not like your cup of tea all the time, you know. And I think like my biases show up in like lots of ways, right? Like obviously like I am more interested in stories by women and writers of color, just in a kind of I just know that that's a bias. I do know that's a bias, you know. And but it isn't like a conscious thing. It's more about like my enjoyment of a story. But I also know that like I have an easier time with stories that are set in cities. I have an easier time with stories that are contemporary, you know. Just I connect more immediately with these things. And every reader like brings in their set of, you know, like what they want to see and what they connect with, and that all informs taste, you know. And that's kind of why I think it is important to have, you know, different kinds of readers on any given masthead, because otherwise, you know, you start to get into this trap of thinking like, oh, we tastemakers are objective, you know, we all like this one kind of thing and therefore it's the best thing, where obviously that's just not true.
Sarah, Nikki, did you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. It is, I mean, you want to be objective, but it is about taste and what you like, and you don't want things to be one note. So it is important to have like diverse readers or editors, and to offer a diverse range of stories. But I gravitate towards a certain type of story, and I don't like stories that are really violent, or, you know, that maybe male readers would like more. And yeah, stories that in the past I was told these were good and maybe I didn't like them and thought there was something wrong with me. I feel like that's slowly changing. So, which is good.
For sure.
Yeah, it's one of the things that I've always thought about is, when I got into crime fiction and was first published and was looking to make connections, I just didn't see writers of color. It wasn't even, there just weren't that many out there. And it was, I think it was Kelly Garrett who I was talking to, who's been really instrumental in working with things like Pitch Wars, which which helps people get published. She told me, the writers are there, they're just not published. And that was something that really stuck with me. And it seems like short fiction is, I mean, do you think it's a good way for somebody who's looking to break into crime fiction? I mean, is it a viable path to eventually getting, if you want to be, if you want to have books published with a traditional publisher, is that a good route to go?
I don't know if it's worked. I don't think it's worked for me yet. No. It's kind of the path that I came across that somebody else was taking, that they wrote a lot of short stories and eventually they had a series. So I tried that path too. And then I realized I really love writing short stories. So I kind of have been stuck in writing, not stuck, but I enjoy writing short stories. And I'm also really, really slow writer. So it's been tough to finish a book and to get books out. But I just, I thought short stories were my path to a writing career. And then I realized how much I enjoyed it.
Nikki?
It was the same a little bit for me too, that way. Short fiction was definitely like, I didn't, when I sat down to write, it was with the structure of a short story, something, yay long that could be sat and read in an hour or what have you. But I mean, I was reading novels. I just didn't think I had novel stories. So I wrote short fiction, and through that, experienced a lot of what it means to publish, no matter what you're trying to publish, rejection, and agent rejection, and but also I think writing short stories can connect you to a community that is helpful that way to launch you to that next step. I mean, whether or not you get there is a different story, it's a different conversation, but the path is there, and part of that is connecting with people, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think like it's obviously just a lower barrier of entry in the sense that like, you can like write a short story and like get into the community that way. Pitch stories around. It just takes less time to do the writing than a novel. I don't know. If you were to like game it out, I don't know if like it helps or not, because I think in like the traditional publishing world, I don't think like a lot of, especially like crime specific journals are going to be like that helpful in landing like a big publishing deal. But so I don't know, but so I think like any publication credit probably helps a little bit, but like I didn't, that's not the way I went, just because I'm not really a short story writer. but I think it's worth it just to kind of get your feet wet, meet some people, figure out your craft, in these kind of you can kind of experiment more in that form, right? But I don't know in terms of just like the raw, like, agent getting power, if that has, like, I mean, it certainly can't hurt.
That ties to a question I had too. I mean, it's no secret that short stories are in in publishing are considered a tough sell, both either multi or single author anthologies, with a couple of exceptions, either some writers who specialized in short stories over the years and did well. Generally, that I think that's kind of outside of crime fiction, maybe literary fiction, someone like George Saunders or someone like that, or some magazines that Steph mentioned that have been around forever, like Ellery Queen or Alfred Hitchcock. Why do you think? Why do you think that is? That the I mean, are short stories not? Are those books really not selling as well? And why would that be the case?
I was gonna
I don't,
say, I remember I was on a panel with the exact same question like years ago about why short stories aren't as popular. And somebody in the audience, she said that she doesn't read short stories, or she tries, but she just never gets into them because she doesn't feel when she reads, she wants to be immersed in a different world, in a different character. And with short stories, she doesn't, it's almost like she feels like it just can't happen, or it's just too hard. She can't feel immersed in only 5,000 words.
Hmm.
So that just really stuck with me, that, how do you immerse somebody in only 5,000 words? I mean, it's a challenge for
and
sure.
I think there's also an additional challenge with a short story collection, which is that you have to do it over and over again. Each new story, you kind of have to win the reader over anew, whereas the novel you get to kind of like build up. And so I think that, but I don't know from like a marketing perspective why short stories don't do better, because people have short attention spans. They do like to read short things. I mean, we know this because like fiction has been like steadily losing to like people reading random things on the internet. Like I feel like people who might have read short stories are now just like reading like every "Am I the Asshole" thread on Reddit.
That is a good thread, though.
It's always, um, and we take those plot points and we insert them in short fiction. No,
Exactly.
I mean, you mentioned George Saunders, and 10th of December hit the bestseller list. I mean, I can't think of another short story collection that's done that.
No.
And he's a particular kind of quirky, voicey writer that I personally love. And there's also writers like Brandon Taylor. His new collection, Filthy Animals, is this quiet kind of book about viciousness and but mundane everyday things too, that I think is on the list too this week. I don't know that there is an equivalent for crime fiction. I think that, I mean, with all short stories, it's like, great, you have a short story collection. Do you have a novel too? Like, you can sell both. You can't just sell one. And that's what you hear from agents. I think still, that's great. Call me when you have a novel. And that's the thing that has to happen. I think it's always going to be that way.
And I think, Ed, when you said a short story writer, like, I knew you were going to say George Saunders, because there aren't a lot. There really are very, very few who have reached that level of kind of pervasiveness that you do get like novelists becoming household names a lot more regularly than short story writers. And I can't even think of a single crime writer who's kind of made their bones that is like on that scale as a short story writer. I feel like the short story collections that do okay from the crime side are by authors who are already very well established, because I think that's the other path in. Once you're like Stephen King, publishers will like, give me whatever you have, whereas, for us, no publisher is being like, oh, can you just like, you know, people will read whatever you scribble on a dinner napkin. Like, I think you have to have that status in crime world, at least, to kind of have short stories be like, you know, the same kind of bread and butter as novels.
And even then, I mean, Lawrence Block's Hitman series, his killer books, you know, I mean, they were all short story collections that he put out. I think the first two, at least. And I don't think they hit the list. I mean, I knew about them because I, you know, sit at his feet happily. But also like Walter Mosley. I mean, he's put out collections that, you know, get a lot of fanfare and we see a lot of as crime writers, but outside of that, I don't think anybody's noticing that. Not like they ought to.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking the other writer I was thinking was maybe Joyce Carol Oates, but again, she's somebody who came, like Steph said, outside of was already successful, and again, people will, you know, buy her shopping lists and don't look at her Twitter feed, but yeah.
Twitter feed. Never.
I love Joyce Carol Oates. I love her. Her Twitter once in a while, like, but I love her.
I think it was the foot picture that like which was a horror story in itself.
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah,
I only heard about it and I was happy.
Like, why is Joyce Carol Oates' foot trending? And I looked it up and I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I remember there was a app a couple of years ago. I think maybe Sarah, maybe you had a story with them, and their goal was they presented the stories in a beautiful format. I think they paid and sent the author some kind of swag or something.
Got a T-shirt.
Yeah, I mean, it was a really nice. It was a really cool idea, and one of their pushes was we want to make, you know, stories that people can read in line at the bank. You know, which makes sense, right? I mean, you think short attention spans, crime fiction, but even me, like, I enjoy reading crime short stories, but I don't want to do it when I'm in line at the bank. I'd rather play like Words with Friends or something, you know, or scroll Facebook. I mean, it doesn't seem to hit that same need for me.
Yeah, I was sad. It was Great Jones Street.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was awesome because they paid well, and they would get each story. They get artists to create these cool covers for every short story.
Oh, that is cool.
Load on this app, and I think they went. I think was a couple years ago. They sold to another company, or I'm not quite sure what happened, but I had such high hopes, and it seemed to be doing well, and so I don't know, but I mean, there's all these other like chat apps, or I guess they're short story apps, like Hooked, and you read the story like it's text messages. I think there's several of those. I don't know how well they do. I know Wattpad has one.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Are there ways to make short stories more viable to the public?
I feel like the same things have been said decade upon decade. You know, it's either the novel is dead, nobody buys short fiction. But I mean, like, I'm gonna be 50 in a few years, so like, you know, the 80s, the 90s, 2000, like every decade we're saying the same thing. So I feel like there's this finite pool, and people, you know, die off and new people come in, but it's still the same size that we keep moving. So I don't know that we can ever expand upon that. I feel it's just it is what it is. And you know, I mean, and I'm talking about the people who are in it who are not also the writers. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, there's just so many more writers, I think, for short fiction now. But like that reader pool is really the same size. It just adds some, loses some, but it's not really changing. But we're all still interested in it, you know, and I think that's gonna it's still going to be this little niche thing that's never going away. Like the novel's never going to be dead. Somebody's going to read it, and, be it Razorblade Tears or the next Juniper Song book or, another excellent anthology, somebody's going to be there to read it. I don't know that we can make a lot of money at it, but somebody that's the thing that's changed. The money stayed exactly the same.
Since the 80s.
Inflation, the money.
Well, I remember reading, like one of my first favorite early writers was Fitzgerald, and reading how he, lived off he was like, his biographers would say like, yeah, he needed somebody that year, so he sold a few short stories. And I was like, what? How's that? And he was like, I mean, no one ever said he was, like financially savvy, but he was, like traipsing through Europe and stuff like that. I was like, he had to make something off those, off that work.
Yeah, but that was when you could get through on a few thousand a year. I'm reading the letters of Shirley Jackson, and all of her letters, she's like, I'm working on this thing, and then a narrator will come in and be like, this was We Always Lived in the Castle. And then she's like, but it's not come together. I'm going to put it in the drawer and leave it. Perhaps you could send a little money. The furnace is on the fritz. And I'm like, and this is like 58 for her. And it is just like, it's never changed. You could just get by on this enormous sum that was in 58 is this little sum now, but you could still get by on it back then. And I'm just like, but it was all work. She worked so hard. I'm in my Shirley Jackson field right now.
This is kind of this is obviously a subjective question, but for each of you, what makes a good short story?
A crime short story?
Yeah.
I will say, having read a lot in the last year and kind of seen the range, I think like a really strong connection with the characters and like the character dynamics, I think are necessary, because the plot stuff, something I noticed is like the dark gritty stuff, if it didn't have the emotional stuff behind it, I just kind of, it washed right over me, because nothing is shocking. You will be surprised the number of stories that I read in last year that ended with some form of cannibalism, because that's like the most shocking thing.
Oh,
like very high. Like there's several. Like I just read enough that I was like, oh, people are doing this, and I feel like each author thinks it's like shocking, and it's been done well too, and it's there. But I think like you're never gonna get very far on like plot mechanics alone. I mean, obviously some very tight plotting can be very interesting too, but I think if the writing and the emotional connection are not there, then it's not going to rise, because everybody is doing, everyone is working with kind of the same set of tropes, the same, it's hard to make violence and crime, interesting on its own without going deeper.
For sure.
yeah, it's character. I agree.
You have to, it's like I always say, I write about love and identity, and it doesn't matter whether there's a dead body or just somebody sitting on the curb sad about something. But I mean, like love and the things you can, you empathize with your character. You have to be able to do that. And if you can't translate that and do that to somebody else, then a story, no matter how good the plot, will never work, like Steph said.
So we talked about the personal elements that are important. Does crime fiction, and let's say within short stories, does it need to have a political element? Does it have to represent social concerns as well?
I think not at all. I like it when it does. I think I probably have some bias towards that, because that's what I write, and I think that crime fiction has the ability to do that. But I think that like, you know, very small scale stories that are like personal in nature, that are not like necessarily trying to do, you know, I think especially within like a short story, you know, you're not like, you know, with a novel, you can really like explore worlds and get really deep in there. But like, you know, I think a short story is more of a snippet, and you know, you get, maybe you get some underpinnings, maybe you don't, but I don't think it's necessary to get political. You know, I don't think it hurts. I think sometimes it can make the world richer, just in the way that like, you know, a sense of place, a sense of context can make a world, it will make the world richer. But it's not a must for me.
I think writing crime fiction, I mean, it's sort of in its nature to tackle like social issues, just because, or maybe ones that I read, or those are ones I gravitate towards, or usually it's, you know, kind of the battle between, I mean, it tackles race or class, social issues, because you know, people are pushed to the edge. And I like reading about people who are desperate, or why they're pushed to the edge, or what's making them push to the edge. And usually it is social factors, or economic, or class. And those are the stories that interest me.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly it. You know, there's the reason, the solid reason behind why we're all going to rob the bank. You know, it needs not just to be because it's Tuesday and that's what we do, which can be good.
Yeah, I kind of like that actually.
But
So
that's
somebody,
a whole different thing. And even then, it's you know, more than that. But I mean, like you know, somebody's gotta, you know, somebody needs braces, and you know, and we're not going to get that money. The copay, let it be insurance scam. You know, the copay is too much, and this is why we're going to do that.
yeah, it's, you know, I sort of gravitate towards stories that have a political bent to them. I just found that recently, but I think it's something I've thought about so much that now when I look at anything, even if it doesn't have that, if I can see the writers trying not to incorporate that, then it's kind of that old, I forgot who said it, but that old saying, like, all art is political.
Yeah.
If it doesn't have that element, then it's just saying it supports the status quo. You know, I don't necessarily agree with that, but I get it. You know, and that's kind of been my mindset recently. We have probably about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to ask Richie, what's your favorite short story of all time, and what about it, and why?
So mine is hands down always Until Gwen by Dennis Lehane.
Oh,
What's it called again?
Until Gwen.
I got to write that down.
It is my hands down favorite, just to read, but also it's the one I go back to when I'm stuck. You have you know, somebody getting out of prison. You get a little backstory about how they got into prison. You get the overall theme of who am I and who cares who you are, and you know, how people see you becomes your identity, and whether that's good or bad. You have a father-son dynamic. You have, I mean, like, everything is in this story, and it's so jam-packed, and it's just so, it is everything I want in a story, and it doesn't get old for me. So Until Gwen.
I read his story. Was it Animal Rescue that the movie The Drop was based on?
Yeah,
That was really good.
that's an excellent one too.
I don't know if I have a absolute favorite. I'd have to think about that more. But you know, I do love Joyce Carol's Where Are You Going? Where Have You Been? I mean, I think that's an amazing story, and I think that's one that it is a crime story, and it's based on, but it's all this kind of buildup of dread. It's very kind of driven by these characters, and word for word, just impeccably written. So I would say that's certainly up there.
Mhm.
I can't think of my favorite story.
But you have to.
I was thinking, well, yesterday I was watching this panel. It was actually Joyce Carol Oates and who else was on it? Mark Haskell Smith, but Gina Frangello, I think that's how you pronounce her name. She was there, and it made me remember that I read her short story collection called Slut Lullabies, and it was just so good. I mean, it's not just about sexuality, but it's just about family dynamics, and it was like just some parts of it it's just so honest, and I just love that collection. So I actually last night went back and started reading some of those short stories. So that's what came to mind. So Slut Lullabies is just a really good short story collection.
Yeah, for me, there's a friend, actually, a contemporary writer, Art Taylor, and he's won like all of the crime fiction awards over the years, and he's sort of regular in that circle. That super nice, humble guy, but just a ferociously talented writer. And he a short story of his, and I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's about two parents who, it's modeled after a fairy tale, and two parents who are watching their kids play in a blizzard. And it's flash fiction, and the darkest thing I've ever read, but it just and utterly heartbreaking, and how he managed to do it in 300 to 400 words, I just find bewildering. And I'm envious. But
Wow.
it's so good, and I can't remember the name, and I have no way to refer anyone to it. So
Oh, great.
enjoy that. I'm gonna put it actually on like Twitter or Instagram or something later. So if anyone's listening and wants to find it, that's how to find it. And speaking of that, who are some writers today, as to close it out, that were working in short fiction that you'd recommend?
Nikki,
Um,
her collection's amazing. Love and Other Criminal Behavior is so good.
Thank you. Gosh, who would I? There's so many great ones. I mean, Sarah. There's another writer, Sarah Gillick, who wrote a phenomenal story in Tough. There's, Preston Lang. I think he's been in BAMS a couple times over the years.
I have one of his stories in the upcoming collection. He's really good.
He is. He is. He was in Rock and a Hard Place a couple times. Gosh, there's so many really talented writers out there right now working, and I'm just so in awe of them.
I loved one of my actually Nikki is also in the upcoming BAM, but but since she's already been recommended and is on this panel, Faye Snowden has a story in BAMS about voting that blew me away. Yeah, I actually want to read the novel version of that story. And I'm now automatically interested in everything she writes. And I recently read Todd Goldberg's collection, The Low Desert, and that's actually a short story collection by a single author that came out this year, and that's fantastic. He's a really great writer.
All right, so with that, we'll get ready to close out, but I just wanted to ask each of you to let people know where they can find you. What's the best way? Your social media channel of choice, or is your website, or?
I'm Nikki Dolson in all the places, just one word, Twitter, Instagram, all that. Nikki Dolson.
I'm Steph Cha. People think it's Steffi, which is fair, but it's my middle initial is Y. And I am mostly on Twitter.
And I'm Sarah M. Chen. I'm mostly on Twitter, but I'm also on Instagram.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Oh, and again, I'm at Amar, and I'm at eamar.com. I think that's it. No, I haven't been there for a while, so it needs to be updated. And I have a newsletter there that recommends crime fiction and talks about different stuff in the crime fiction community that comes out monthly. So I want to say thank you so much to Sarah, Steph, and Nikki for this panel. This was a lot of fun, and I'm not actually just saying that I enjoyed myself. I was going to say that regardless, but this was actually was really interesting. I wrote down stuff like I was a member of the audience, like, oh, that's what character. Okay, but no, this was great. So thank you so much to the three of you. Thank you to Sean and everybody at 1455, including the Bens, our session hosts, for orchestrating this. And make sure you check out the rest of the festival. And thanks so much for tuning in.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.